I feel like times like that are good though. They
Oh,
kind
for
of
sure.
force you to let go of certain things. That was one lesson that became very obvious to me is that there's a lot of stuff that I had in my life
Hmm.
that I just because things were getting so bad, I had to let go of stuff. And so I had to
Yeah.
start deciding what's really important here. Like what can I not live without? And then at the end of all that,
Mhm.
oh, well, wait a second. There's these 3 or 4 things that are actually super important. I just need to focus on. I need to let everything go. So it's very cathartic in the long run.
Welcome back to the Better Than Best Academy, where we have inspiring conversations with extraordinary people. Whether you're an artist or an entrepreneur or anyone that identifies with the term creative and you're looking to learn something new, our goal is to provide just that. We want to give you the tools and the lessons that you need to fulfill your purpose while making a positive impact on the world. Now, let's dive into today's episode. So, just so our audience has context of who you are, I'd love for you to kind of share with us who you are, where you're from, how you got to where you are currently.
Yeah, so the short version of that story, let me see, when I was growing up, I was super into a couple of different things that I just had a passion for. Mostly a lot of that involved around reading, writing, a couple different kinds of music, and just like some martial arts, stuff like that. And so I was very focused my whole life on like certain things that I just had a real passion for. And then when I took that level of focus and I went into the military and I wanted to apply that same skill set to my career and what was happening. And the reality of what happened was that I got hit with a wave of mental health issues, and I really wanted to be good at what I did. I really wanted to be like, somebody that could be counted on, somebody that was just respected, and it just wasn't happening. Like I was doing my absolute best, but I felt like I was fighting a very uphill battle. I was very depressed with intermittent bouts of manic psychosis, and I was just like, it was a nightmare. I was struggling with a lot of stuff, and there were some real things that had an impact on that, but I kinda knew, like, there's something wrong with me, like, it's not just that I'm, like, kinda lonely or I'm kinda homesick or the situation kinda sucks, it's like, there's something going on here, and after 2 years of that, 2 years of hating every single second, like, literally just it was a struggle to get up in the morning, every breath felt like, "Do I wanna keep this? Do I wanna keep going?" And it was very difficult. And, something kinda happened after, like, 2 years. I got a break, I guess, like, it just kinda it eased off for about a month for whatever reason, I have no idea why. But in that time, I realized 2 things. 1, life isn't so bad when you don't feel like that, like, life isn't that bad, so I stopped hating my life, and 2, I was just terrified that if I went back to that, I wouldn't make it again. So I decided, "Okay, life is good. I need to hold on to this, but I'm not going to if I go back to that place. I need to figure this out." So I got really serious. It's like, I have no idea what to do. This is a while back, so the internet's not what it is now. So I went to the bookstore for those of you old enough to remember that. Went to the bookstore, went to the self-help section, and I looked around. I was like, I had no idea what I was looking at. I just picked up a random book. It happened to be Tony Robbins, and I picked up some very good insight from that. Some very practical tools that helped me to overcome those mental health challenges. And it was real stuff. It wasn't like, oh, just think better. It was like these are some strategies. And so the next 2 years completely turned around. I got very serious, like, just religiously devoted myself to, like, how can I perform how can I hit peak performance? How can I be happy, from a spiritual standpoint, from a psychological standpoint? And, I kind of lived out some of the dreams that I had about, like, being successful in that space that I was in, got promoted ahead of my peers, had a great time of it. And I learned a lot of valuable things. After that, I got out, I went around to do some different stuff. I DJ'd for a few years. I was a bouncer for a while. I was in sales for several years, and then I was this whole time I'm researching, I'm, like, just reading the same self-help stuff just for the same reasons. And at some point, I went to broadcasting school and I was, like, learning about, how to make your own content and podcasts and stuff like that. I wanted to write a book about something to do with human nature, and I was taking notes for it, and I was like, there's no books out there that are really giving me practical advice on psychology. It's all either garbage or it's like a really abstract stuff it's like so technical that it doesn't like apply. And so I was reading that stuff. I was reading the health journals. I was reading the weird stuff. I was reading the experiments and all this crap. And I was thinking, okay, how do I apply this to my life? And it took a little bit of brain power, but I was figuring out some stuff like, "Oh, well, if because of this thing, I can do this, or because of that, I can do this." And I thought, I really wish somebody was making content so that I could just, like, hear this and it was simple and nobody was doing it. And so I thought, maybe I'll do it. So I started this psychology hacks podcast. No medical degree. I'm not a doctor by any stretch of the imagination, but I just wanted to take what I knew about human nature, about how the brain works, take my passion for research, and I wanted to figure out ways to apply that and to teach that to people in a way that's accessible. So I see myself as like a funnel. Take all the technical stuff, pour that in, and I distill it down into something that's simple and useful. And so that's been the show for the last few years, and it led into a life coaching business just kind of organically. And I did TikTok for a little while. I got kind of fed up with that type of media. But yeah, that's basically my story in a nutshell.
Man, I love it. So much to unpack there. So from military to having your own battle with mental health to finding that the psychology books that you were looking for, the self-help books you were looking for was so abstract that you wanted to make it principle and make it more practical. And
Mhm.
and I love that. And I mean your content's great. And I
Thank
noticed
you.
you hadn't been on TikTok in a while. And I totally get that. Like my my attack towards TikTok has definitely went down a lot lately. I've been more focused on and just making the
Yeah,
podcast in general.
me
But
too.
but man, yeah, I totally get that. So with this need for I love the fact that you said that you saw a need and it wasn't being met, so you were
Mhm.
like, I'm just gonna start meeting this need. What was it in you that made you think, okay, I can do this?
Probably sheer audacity.
Yeah.
With a trace of narcissism. The early days of the show, man, were not what they are today. They were very much just, I took this book that I read this week, or I read this one study and said, "Here's this specific thing. Here's what I learned. Here's what you can do." And maybe I didn't phrase it as, I literally just thought of this, or I spent the whole week researching this one topic. I may have presented it differently. Um, but the intention was still the same essentially, but the form was not. So I started where I was at. I started with just the passion, just the knowledge that I thought I could get some information across, and that was about it. And it just kinda grew from there. I started at like, well, what can I can do the bare minimum. I can take book reviews every year. That's actually how I had started the podcast originally. Is that I've had several, but before any of them stuck, the way that I was learning to do that kind of content creation was through book reviews. So I think that's still out there somewhere. I'm not gonna say the name
Yeah.
of it. Horrible, but yeah, no, like that was, I kinda just escalated that a little bit. I figured, well, I tell people I'm not a doctor. They can't get mad at me if I'm wrong about something. So they still do, but it's okay.
And man, I loved that. It was just that initiative to start where you're at. I think
Yeah.
that's great. And that's an awesome practical step for those that are listening that are creative or that feel that they're creative but don't know where to start. And the key is to just start because it's not going to be pretty. Like, I mean,
Yep.
I can think of my early stuff, even like when I rap, I was using a hand me down Dell laptop and a rock band mic,
Yeah.
and it sounded like hot garbage. But I
Yeah.
started and I stuck with it, and I mean, next thing you know, I'm using, a studio setup and whatnot and actually making high quality beats, and I say all that to say that you've gotta start somewhere,
Mhm.
and that's there's such a beauty to that, and there's a beauty in the rawness that comes from that, because it's like when you've got that and you touched on it being a bit narcissistic about the approach, but it's just like it's almost like the Dunning-Kruger effect of, like, when you first start something and the level of confidence you have. Sometimes I wish I had some of that confidence sometimes because it's like the more you get into things and the more knowledge you get, the more you realize you know nothing.
Yep.
And there's plenty of times I've pressed
Yep.
record and been like, "That was awful." But early me would have been
Yeah.
like, "Man, this is amazing." But man,
But
with
you
that said, and this whole podcast is really tied to the creative process and the idea of being creative. So I would love to hear your thought. When you hear the word creative, what comes to mind?
as above, so below. We're made in the image of the creator. We are inherently creative in our own way. And I've heard it described a few ways. I think that my personal interpretation of the word is too abstract to literally explain,
Yeah.
but there's a couple things I could point. One is obviously the generation of something from nothing, which there's never really ever like a 0 to something. It's never 0 to 1 because it's just a transformation, right? It's a transformation of an emotion to an idea, of a symbol to a concept. And then that concept is transformed from a mental state into a physical state or whatever, If it's music, obviously it's not physical, but I mean, it is in a sense that, everything's just energy and you're just changing the shape of that energy, right? So you're taking something and transforming it into something else. That's all it is. I think that a lot of creativity comes from a spiritual dimension. Not everybody agrees with that. That's totally fine. But if you do have an issue with that interpretation, what I would suggest is just when I say that, just imagine that I'm talking about the unconscious mind, something that we can't really identify, put our finger on. And I think that the unconscious does play a huge part in that. And I think that's probably undeniable. But
Yeah.
transformation is the name of the game. You don't have to produce something out of nothing. That's already been done. We're already here. We're already good. You don't have to do that. You just have to worry about molding, about shaping it. And I believe that it's your God given right to do that because we're made, as I said, in the image of the one above. And so that's something that just comes naturally. And we may have to learn the techniques. We may have to get the form down a little bit, but we can do that, and same way we learn anything else.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And I always look at it like I think it was Rick Rubin said that some of the best art is when we choose to let God into the conversation.
Yeah.
Like we let our creator in because the moment we choose to let him in on it, he's gonna our creator is gonna guide us into what is needed in the moment. Because I feel like
Mhm.
a lot of times as being someone who's creative, I think like you said, like we've been created to be creative, but more so than that, it's like we're essentially a vessel of energy.
Mhm.
And I love the way you put that because we're just kinda we're channeling an energy and we're putting it out there and like our own self and our own thoughts and expressions of it. Once it comes out of us, it comes out in a different way. It's unique and it's not that it's 100% original because obviously there's not an original thought out there. But man, yeah, and I love that idea of just man, that's a great answer to the
There
question.
there's not an original thought per se, but there is original flavor to
Yeah,
the thought.
exactly.
So you can color it through your specific lens because
Sure.
you think if you think about how the brain is set up, you're there's a biological framework that's built there. And it's not a blank slate. There's some stuff that is organized a certain way. Some of it's blank, some of it's ready to learn. There's a lot of consistency, but every physical structure is gonna be just a little bit for any number of reasons, and there's a multi on top of that, the way that information is encoded, processed, interpreted, the way that beliefs form at a really, like, unconscious, basic level, stuff that happens before like, we can't even remember it on, like, intellectually. It's just something that's there. It's something that gets embedded in us at a very early age. That's all totally unique. Everything's like this the same thing can happen to 10 different people, and they're gonna interpret it 10 different, right? And you do that times the infinite number of things that happen to us, and you understand that everything that happens after a certain point, it's judged based off of the things that are already there. So the brain works by association. So that network of associations and unique ideas is ridiculously complicated, and it's different from anybody else's because of the fact that no two people are gonna interpret the same things. No two people have the exact same experiences. Even if you have similar experiences, it's different for you. It's different for any number of reasons. And there's, just the complexity of it, like, you could spend forever thinking about it. But because of that, you can absolutely give your own unique flavor to something. So it's like even I was watching something today on plot formation for story writing, and they were talking about the archetypes, and I was thinking like these really successful stories follow the same pattern over and over again, but they're all different stories.
Yeah.
But they're also not the different stories. They're all the same, but they're all different because that author has filtered it with their unique perception and experience.
Yeah, I love that, and I can't agree more because it's just that idea, man, just flavor and even taste because it's something
Mhm.
I feel like
Yeah.
we develop both of those things. The more that
Mhm.
you're creating something and the more that you experience life, it kind of goes hand in hand.
Yep.
Because I can remember that like throughout my rap career, my first songs, I was like super young, like maybe early high school, and of course my life experiences there were not nearly the same as when I'm making out of college and I'm making music, and it's like
Yeah.
it's so interesting there. And what I find interesting too when it comes to that creative process, I heard it said a certain way by a rapper that I know, and it's almost like he was getting canceled for changing his thoughts and changing his mind because it's like that once you commercialize art
Yeah.
and creativity, people almost buy into you being a certain way
Mhm.
and they forget that life happens and we evolve and we change and we grow and we transform. So why shouldn't our art be a reflection of our life? And that's just such an interesting concept to me. But man, right off the bat, I just want to give you props for like just the how thought out and well spoken you are about these topics. And I mean, you
Thank you.
probably have heard that before, but I just want to give credit where credit's due. And so what's the name of your podcast again? Because I want people to go check you out for sure.
The podcast is Psychology Hacks. Jack Grant.
Psychology. Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. So, and we'll link your links in the description for sure. But yeah, I love that. So with this, and the people that may know you, may not know you well, I love asking this question. What do you think people misunderstand about you the most?
Me on a personal level,
Yeah, on personal, professional.
I think that people underestimate the range of my personality. I
Yeah,
think that's probably the best way to put it. I'm a very, very complicated person, and I'm not saying that to be like to 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 be a certain way. I have a lot of different aspects to who I am, and they're all true. They're all in conflict with one another, and I think everybody is.
for sure,
I would imagine that the reason I'm the way that I am is probably because I really am curious about exploring all of those. So even the ugly side of me that I don't like, and there's a lot of those sides too. It's like I want to get to know those parts of me, and I want to go as deep into that as I can. So that'll take me all the way from being super high energy, very exuberant, very outgoing, all the way to total hermit mode, just a monk. Not wanting anything to do with anybody. It's really interesting because a lot of the people that met me last year have very good friends of mine have made comments to me about how stoic and serious I am, and those are their words. And I think, huh, that's interesting because people that met me 2 years ago would have said that I was a ridiculously goofy, kind of like weird, flowy person. It's like I haven't changed. I'm actually both of those people, and I'm a lot more than that. It's I try to live as much in the moment as I can, and so not always aware of the things that are acting upon me, but environment plays a huge role on how you behave. There's a lot of different factors too, but I try to act authentically as much as I can.
for sure,
And so just as I go out throughout life, I mean, different parts of me are gonna express themselves a little bit differently. And I think what I do is I don't try to hide, and it weirds people out because I'll get in friendship or relationship with somebody and 6 months later, I'm kinda not the same person, and I'm like, "No, I am. You have to be around me for 5 or 6 years before you've seen all the sides." That's just how it is.
sure.
So, it's frustrating for people, though.
Man, I love that you say that because I definitely can agree. And the interesting part of it for me was it was probably about a year or so ago that I came to that realization. Because I mean, growing up, I felt like I was the chameleon. Like I could definitely blend into whatever.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, and it was like, and I always refer back to high school, of course, because it was such an impressionable time. But that was very a cliquish time. Is
Yeah.
for my generation, like, you had your jocks, you had your goths, you had your country people, you had your hip hop people, your all the different spheres, but I was friends with all of them. But the tricky part about that is they weren't friends with each other. And it was
Yeah.
almost like I was really good at just, like, turning it on. Like, if I
Mhm.
needed to fit into the skater lane, I'm all in on that lane. I'm
Yeah.
listening to my punk rock, I've got my Etnies on. If I'm hanging out with my country friends, I'm like, I can lean into some of that music, and it was funny, like, I kinda use music as a staple, but I literally would, like, morph into all these different almost multiple personalities But it took me realizing that, like, that could be so exhausting trying to turn them on and off, and
Yep.
I finally got to a spot where I was like, "I don't have to perform anymore. I can just be truly me, and if you don't like whatever, like you said, right in the moment, like, if you don't like that side of me, then give it some time because 'cause you're probably gonna find a side that you like or vice versa. There might not be a side that you like of me, but
Yeah.
it's, like, really leaning into all areas and having that introspection and being able to really dive deep into that stuff, man, and I love that you touched on that, but I think that's great, and man.
And one thing to play off of that, this was a huge it sounds cheesy, but it was a huge epiphany for me. I was struggling a lot with, just some issues, and I was trying to get to the bottom of it. I was trying to do the shadow work. I was trying to understand, like, why do I feel this way? Why am I so like, why do I always feel cut off? Why do I keep getting into these negative, toxic cycles with people? Why do I keep going after the wrong things? And basically what it boiled down to, there's a lot of, introspection that was involved, but basically what had happened was I realized that a lot of the things I was after were things that other people, and it was I wanted it because other people thought it was cool. And I thought that, well, if other people want this and I have it, then other people will want to be around me. And it wasn't a thought out conscious thing where I was like, this is my plan. It was the unconscious going, oh, this is what we'll do. This is how we'll make them love us, right? But the issue is that when you go after things for the sake of those things and not for an internal motivation, what happens is you create this facade of who you are, and you may get those things, but they're not fulfilling because it's not what you really want, first of all. Second, the people that get attached to you, they like you because of that thing that you've created. They don't like you, right? And you know that. You don't receive their love. All of that attention and affection, whatever else, it stops short of that thing that you've created. So you're unable to experience it, and you're holding on to this empty shell, and like you don't wanna let it go because, well, it's the closest you have. And what
Yeah,
I realized was a huge part of the reason I kept getting into, like, toxic relationships was because it was the people that I was drawn to were psychotic, right? Like, they were crazy, and I'm not saying that to be funny, they were nuts, and I was like, "Why do I keep doing this? What is it about me that's selecting this or attracting it?"
hey, I just wanted to pause here and give you the opportunity to either apply to be a guest on this show or give you the opportunity to work with me as your coach. To do that, you will find either of those links in the description that'll say either be a guest on the show or book a free 30-minute Zoom discovery call. Each path will get you headed towards living your most creative and fulfilled life as you learn to live better than best. All right, now back to today's conversation.
Whatever. And I realized it's because those are the people I don't feel like I have to pretend around because they're freaking crazy. So why should I care what they think? And I just didn't.
Yeah.
Once I realized that, I was like, "Well, that's stupid. That I don't need somebody's permission to be me. Like, I can do that no matter who I'm around." And so I started it was a process, but I started to let go of all that stuff, all that stuff I created. That was a huge, 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 huge spike in creativity in general in my life because like we talked about earlier, it's a channeling from a spiritual plane, something out. The more stuff that you hold on to, the more preconceived notions of what I need to be, what my art needs to be, what this is, the more you're putting up the block because all you have to do is let it out. You just have to let it flow. There's a certain level of technique that you need to learn. Like if you're writing, you have to learn some prose. If
Yeah.
you're playing music, you have to learn painting, obviously. But the creative side of it, that's the technical side. The creative side is very much something that you turn on and you just let it come.
Yeah.
Right, and so when you and everybody's story is gonna be different, but I would really encourage people to look at, like, what are the things that I'm holding on to? What are the things I'm trying to make this? So if I want my art to be seen around the world, why? Like, it's fine to want that, but why? Is it because I want attention? Is it because on some level I'm looking to find, the future baby mama? Is that what I'm trying to get? Because if that's what I'm after unconsciously, that's gonna screw me up because I'm gonna get somebody's attention and I'm gonna be like, "Oh, I'm satisfied now. I gotta stop making art." A very good exercise to kind of let go of all that stuff is to actually sabotage yourself a little. So
Yeah.
make something and don't record it, forget about it. Make something that you would not want people to steal and put it on the internet. I do these things that are just for you. Like you're not making art for anybody or for anybody. particular purpose just to create, that has been life changing for me. And that's something that I would really encourage other people to do. And it goes hand in hand with that shadow work.
Yeah, man. I love the way you put that. And it goes back to like if you truly or creative. So like say you truly are a musician, then when you get to that why,
Mhm.
and if the why isn't to be rich and famous, the why
Yeah,
isn't to get the baby mama, the why isn't to get the awards, it's to create for the sake of creating.
yeah,
Like, I can think like, I've heard of plenty of examples, but even myself, like, I can think back when I was making music, and even now when I'm playing drums, like, I play drums for my church, but, I mean, I'll just play drums for me. Like, I have a beat up drum set in our garage because that's the
yeah,
space we have with 2 kids now, and I'll just go out and I'm like, my son needs some time running around the garage. I'm like, "Alright, knock yourself dead and go do
yep,
something," and he'll end up trying to play drums with me. But literally, no one's around. I don't even have headphones on sometimes, and I'm just
yeah,
sitting there and I'm just playing, and it's
mhm,
the best thing ever.
yep,
Sometimes the best stuff comes out, and I'm like, "Man, I could totally capture that and use it later or put it on a song or make a song out of it," but why?
yeah,
'Cause it's for me. It's like it's
mhm,
the connection with the creator. It's tapping into that spiritual side and just it's it's like it's crazy to describe when it comes to when it that creativity because it's when you're in that flow state of
yep,
creativity. It's there's nothing like it. And when you've gotten to that space and that's your why when it comes to creativity, then you figured it out because
yep,
the rest will come. And I love how you brought into that idea of what you're carrying in your baggage because that's the whole thing that I do with my coaching practice and helping the creative people is helping them not think about how technical they are in this moment, not thinking about why they're trying to do it for everyone else, but like tapping into who they are truly. Because it's like
mhm,
it's out of knowing who we are that we're able to create something amazing.
certainly, yeah, it's fundamentally a spiritual practice, right? And so I think that it's something that should be a part of anybody's meditation or prayer or
Yeah,
anything, like whatever practice you have. There should be something creative in there because that it puts you in touch, it puts you in harmony with your creator because you're acting in accordance with that pattern. So I also do advise people to, so much of creativity comes from a really deep place within us.
yeah,
And, if you're carrying around a lot of baggage, if that's what you're expressing, you're gonna screw yourself up a little bit.
yeah,
So, I mean, we've all seen the stereotypical psychotic artists, the people that are just, like, so out of touch and, like, it's a common problem. It really is, and it's like, we see it with people that are successful, but it happens so much more with people that are unsuccessful too. It's like it's that constant torment, and you can see people whose art reflects that torment, and it's interesting to read them. Like I love that Edgar Allan Poe. Sometimes I'm reading his stuff. I'm like, why? Like, what was? Why would you do this? What was going through your head?
yeah,
And when you focus on that darkness that you have inside of you, you're just magnifying it, right? And I think that people really, I did this too. A lot of people fall into the trap of trying to express something with their art, but they're not expressing it, or they're expressing something negative. They think, "Well, this is how I release it." No, it's not a release. What you're doing is when I get home from the gym every night, I go to sleep pretty quickly because I'm exhausted,
yeah,
right? When I spend 2 hours expressing something negative, I feel better because I'm releasing it. That release is what feels good, right? It's that moment of like, okay, I'm not holding it anymore. But all you're doing when you put that much energy into it, you're nurturing it. You're adding fuel to the fire. And you don't want to nourish whatever you don't want to have grow. And so a lot of times people they're actually just creating more and more problems for themselves by trying to express their this stuff through their art. So I really advise that people do the shadow work separate.
yeah,
They go through that process, and a lot of my shows about that because it's not that it shouldn't ever come out through art because art's an expression of life and there's negative stuff in life. Um, but if that's your means of therapy, like you're really screwing yourself over, and I see it a lot. And people that do it are so stubborn about it. they are so insistent that like, "No, this is helping me." It's like, no, the release at the end of it is cathartic. Everything
Yeah,
you don't that's not how you get there, though. That's not how you're supposed to get
seriously.
there.
No, yeah, and I agree 100% because they'll spend, yeah, like their whole life's work. I can think of a few different artists that I've heard in particular, and like it's album after album, and they'll even call it therapy. Like there's this one
Yeah.
guy, and that was the name of his album, and I'm like, that's great, and you're releasing it, and you considering yourself, and you're believing that like, he was even like he believed in God, and he was spiritual, and, like, he was uplifting
Mhm.
in thought, but all of his music said the opposite, and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Man, it must be such a tormenting life to sit there." Because I mean, when you're working on the art, it's like you said, you're looking at all the different aspects. You're hearing that over and over and over, and I think back to, like, I worked for a she was like a life coach, kind of a ministry on YouTube kinda thing, and I was her
Mhm.
video editor, and I literally edited over and over again, like, "Your dreams are possible," like,
Yeah.
positive affirmations, and it seems so to sometimes I'm like, "This is so corny, I've heard this 1,000 times," but it's like the amount of times I heard that, like, there was rarely a time I was in a bad mood in that
Yeah.
season when I worked for the 4 years I worked for her, and it's I look back on it now and I'm like, "No wonder," because, like, all the what I was focusing on, even though it was on a subconscious level even sometimes, I was feeling that positivity, I was feeling that
Mhm.
uplifted thought process, whereas if I was editing, like, a drama or, like, murder mysteries or, like, cold
Yeah.
cases, I'm sure I'd be, like, tormented and depressed all the time, but man, yeah, I love that perspective you brought.
Yeah. Because I mean, the macrocosm and the microcosm are going to reflect each other, and it's not in perfect harmony, but there is definitely a correlation. So if you're changing your internal state to something overall positive,
Yeah,
and it's not through the denial of reality. It's not through saying, "Oh, like, something really bad happened to me. It's okay, I'm fine." But, like, what is the good in that? What is the positive
exactly.
in that, right? Because I mean, you may go through a breakup, for example, and it's like, you're not gonna feel like it's a good thing at the time, but you can choose to
Yeah,
focus on what are the positive things that are coming my way because of this. Well, for one thing, I have gotten rid of something that was not totally perfect for me.
yeah,
Nothing's ever perfect for me. Maybe that doesn't help you. Okay. Well, I'm learning how to heal. I'm learning how to process negative emotion. I'm becoming more competent. I get, next time I start over with somebody else, I've got all these mistakes that I've made that I've learned and I won't make again, right? Things that soured the relationship at the beginning. And if you start thinking about stuff, your brain, once it catches on, will generate that for you, right? And what happens is your internal state changes, right? Because your body doesn't know the difference between thought and reality. So if you're thinking about something horrible happening to you, you physically respond to it the same way as if it was happening, right? If anybody some people argue with me on that. I'm like, okay, well, think about somebody that you really like, somebody that gets under your skin. Think about them for 2 minutes and tell me that you don't have a reaction to that,
seriously.
right? So like your body has a stress response, so you're making yourself sick, you're suppressing your immune system, you're doing all this negative stuff to you, and you're also or priming yourself to see the negative.
Yep,
Whereas if you prime yourself to see the positive and you fill your body with good chemicals and you start to orient your mind towards a higher aspiration, what happens is you start to notice opportunities that weren't there before. And when you are confronted with those things, you actually are in a state where you can take advantage of them, right? And you might have completely missed them otherwise. So it's not positive thinking for the sake of being positive. It's practical. It's like I'm going to do everything I can to make this good, right? And then in the process of that, it's malleable. It changes. Like your whatever happened to you 10 years ago, it didn't happen 10 years ago. I promise you. Because every time you access that memory, it changes. It was recorded inaccurately the first time based off of your own unique perceptions and preconceived notions and your interpretation. And it's changed over and over again. So if you can change the meaning now, if you have some kind of trauma from your past, like you can make the decision to start reframing that as something good, right? Doesn't mean that it was good that it happened, but it does mean that you take control of your life and you make it. And that brings a lot of that's empowering, right? And that gives you the option of creating your life. You can bring that level of creativity into everything you do because now you understand that, oh, hey, I'm not powerless here. If I want my life to look a certain way, I have to figure out a way to make it happen. And then it becomes fun, right? Then it's a challenge. It's the same as writing a song. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I kind of got a feel for what's going to happen. It doesn't really turn out the way I had in my head, but I can still do stuff with this, right? Like this new problem comes in, how do I dance around it, right? And it transforms everything. And again, that's taking charge of your internal state to influence the outer world.
Exactly. And it goes back to, and the simple practical thing you could do is you mentioned it, priming.
Yeah,
For
definitely.
those that don't know what priming is, I mean, you can just Google it. You can Google Tony Robbins priming even,
Yeah.
and it's a great video and it's a guided meditation that gets you in the right mindset. And and it's like you said, when we tie in the physical state, like when we focus in on all those things, like we have the choice. Like what if you focused in and decided that the problems that you faced were actually a gift? Like, what if
Hmm.
the pain that you face was a blessing? Now, not saying that, like, God wants you to suffer through all this stuff and all that stuff, or the creator or whatever you wanna call it, wants you to suffer, but it's that idea, even despite going through crap, because period, life is gonna throw crap at you sometimes, but it's how you choose to face it, and how you choose
Hmm.
to overcome it, and how you choose to see it. Like you said, if you took a moment in your life, and we hear it all the time, write down your gratitude and it'll change your life, and it sounds so corny and cliche, but if you can master
Works.
something as simple as that, like,
Yeah.
something as simple as that, and taking moments to actually breathe, look up some
Hmm.
breath work, those at home, look up some breath work, actually write down some things you're grateful for, and do that for just, like, a week, and then tell me your
Yep.
life isn't gonna start feeling different, because it's those simple things like that that really will take you to the next level in all areas of your life. And I love how you said it, like we create our life. Man, if there's anything that we could get from speaking to each other, anyone listening at home, is like you have the ability to create your life. Period. Like, stop trying to manage it. Stop trying to let the situations that happen to you define you, and find a way to say, no, this is the life that I would like to live. How can I take what I have and go make it the best that it can be?
And I'll give you an example of that too. I had, my career and everything that I've been in sales for the last couple of years, and I've been very focused on like trying to make that again, like stuff that other people wanted to have. And when it started that and relationship issues and other issues, a bunch of stuff hit me all at once. I was just like, why? What's going on? Like, and it's pretty rare that it there's not been very many times where I've truly failed at something. Like, usually I've had a lot of failures and a lot of setbacks, but I typically, like, am able to recover eventually, and this time around I wasn't, and it was very difficult, and I kept praying about it, I kept thinking about it, I kept contemplating, and I kinda got the sense of just, like, I need to let go. Like, I need to let go of my version of what should happen with this, and what happened was, when I let go of all that stuff and I was finally unclenched and, like, released all this crap that I was holding on to, I started to think, well, okay, what are the things I want? Right. And out of that, it's a long story, but out of that was my first professional writing job, which is a childhood dream. And I was like, I didn't actually think I could get like I figured I could do my own business or my own thing for it, but I didn't think other people would hire me. Right. So it's like in the same way, when you're in the creative process, you're making a song, you're writing a book, you're doing whatever, you're going to have these little riffs that you come up with, or these lines, or these little plots, or whatever, and you're like, "This is good, like, I want this," and it just doesn't work, just doesn't fit, and you've gotta do what we talked about earlier, just, like, release that stuff, like, just you make it for you, you bring it forth, you put it into the world, and then, like, you play with it, you toy with it a little bit. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you release it, you let it go, and life is the exact same way. Like, you can have an idea of, like, "I want the song to go in this direction, I want my life to go in this direction," but you also have to be willing to accept that sometimes that's not the path that you're gonna take. And if you're holding on to something, like, there's a time to persevere and to push. There absolutely is. But it's different than, "This is not meant for you. Let
Yeah.
go. Just release, little human. We'll make things right. Don't worry." And it takes a little bit of, like, I think, experience to learn that, but you have to pay attention. You gotta really pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's so true. And man, I know I love the way you said that because it's so hard for some creatives, and I know it's been myself included. Like we want to hold on to things, and I look at too. Like my whole rap career, like I had 10-year rap career, and I say had for a reason because that season ended, and it,
Yeah,
it didn't make sense logistically because the last song I made was probably my best performing song that I ever
yeah,
made. And but for me to put it down didn't really make sense, but it was crazy to have that kinda inner peace, and I went through this whole journey of understanding who I was because, I mean, back when I was in the thick of my rap career, I identified as I was like Chance the Rapper, but I was me. So I was like, I identified that was who I was, that's what I
yeah,
did. So for me to put that completely down, then I had to see who was the man behind that. Who was
yeah.
the person behind all that? And I think it's so beautiful, like you said, when we have that ability to let go and not hold so tightly to our creative endeavors because they're not ours to begin with. Like
No,
when you really come back to this idea of like you're a vessel and you're a channel for energy to move through you, then you're like, okay, so what could be next? Because that
mhm,
next thing the next metaphorical hat that you put on could be what you're amazing at and you could excel at, but you'll never get to that if you're still holding on to the something that's getting you like barely any results.
yeah, and one thing with that too, like, in terms of, like, when do I let go or, you know, back to the motivation, like, why am
Yeah.
I doing this? We're not really chasing the money, the success,
Yeah.
the accolades. We're chasing the feeling. Like,
Exactly.
we wanna feel a certain way, and a lot of times we think that we can only get that feeling through material things because we live in a material world and we're ruled largely by our ego,
Yeah.
and so it's like, that's why it's such a spiritual process to create is because you have to disassociate from that lower reptilian brain side of yourself, and you have to get in touch with something that's like it's buried inside of you, but it's above you as well. Like it's
Mhm.
coming from somewhere much deeper. And so though that feeling of satisfaction, that contentment, that inner peace that you talked about, like that's what we're really after,
Yep.
like, yeah, everybody, like, I think most people would probably love to drive a sports car and, be a millionaire living on the beach.
For sure.
But you can feel the same way without those things. Now, you may be insane if you feel those things because there might be something wrong with you, but you can cultivate those same
Yeah.
internal states, right? It's the bliss. It comes from what we talked about earlier. A lot of that comes from gratitude. A lot of that comes from being in touch with a higher power, which
Yep.
best conduit for that, I think, is creativity, is making art
Yep.
and just listening, which is hard for people, myself included.
For sure. Yeah, dude, I agree 100%. It's so hard to slow down and listen and be present in the moment. But man, if people could just realize the main thing is the main thing,
Yeah. The
and a
one
lot of
thing.
times we get that so skewed because we think the main thing is when I get here.
Yep.
The truth is when you get here, then the finish line is always going to move and you're never going to be satisfied. But when you truly wake up with that inner peace and that fulfillment, and you're creating and you're getting goals coming from, not getting to, that's been the biggest reframe for myself, even is when I quit trying to make things trying to get to the person that I want to be and realizing I am that person and
Yep.
coming from that. Because it's like you said, like what the person that we want to be, the thing that we want to create is already inside of us.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and and I always go back to that analogy when the sculptor was making the David sculpture, and they were like, "How did you create this beautiful sculpture out of a rock?" And he was like, "I just chiseled away the parts that weren't him."
Yep.
And I feel like that's what we're doing our whole entire lives. Is just
Mhm.
chiseling away the parts that life in its whatever situations, the stories that we've believed have created, and we've become this big block of nothing. But underneath all that, that's who we truly are.
For sure. I think it was Schopenhauer who said something along the lines of, "If I was an evil ruler and I wanted to enslave humanity, I would make them only be happy when they were pursuing something they didn't have."
Mm. Yeah.
And I think that's the state that we're in is like, you can look at it biochemically, you look at, the dopamine that we feel is like the sense of we're getting something, we're pursuing something, we're about to get something, right? And that's really satisfying. And then what happens after we get the thing? We feel depleted, we feel empty inside. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's it. Like it's never as good to get it, right?
Oh,
And so what we're chasing is what we should be chasing. Maybe chasing's the wrong word considering the
yeah.
context, but what we are discovering is the state of just stillness inside of us, the state of just perfect being. And it doesn't mean that we can't take charge and improve our outer lives. We should improve ourselves, we should improve other stuff, but not because we're not good enough, because we are internally very powerful and we have the ability to. Why not? That's what we're here for. We're here to have fun. We're here to make stuff and to make it interesting.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come from a place of lack, it comes from a place of power, and we're allowing that power to shine through us. I think that's a very key distinction to make.
For sure. Man, I love that. And as we kind of get towards the end of our podcast, again, I loved this conversation. It was
Me
great.
too.
It was chock full of insight. And I know that the people listening, you listening at home, definitely got a ton of value from it. Definitely check out Jack on all the platforms and all the ways
Yeah.
that you can check him out. And even if you need some of his coaching, he's a coach as well. And I'm sure that he will definitely steer you in a great direction, just as myself will. But before we go, I want to ask you two more questions.
Absolutely.
First question is, what did I miss? Or do you have any questions for me?
I think this is probably a never ending conversation.
For sure.
So there wasn't anything made. The key points that I hit whenever I talk about creativity or things that we did cover, not focusing on negative stuff, because that's just a huge problem I see with people. And it was a huge problem that I had growing up
Yeah,
too, for a
same.
very long time before I learned that. And two, just learning to let that stuff just kind of flow through you. Because like if you're creating art of any kind. If you're making that does by the way, that doesn't have to be painting and drawing or making
Yeah,
music. That can be,
exactly.
putting together a presentation for your company, something that you wanna have an impact on people, right? Like, art is made to do something. It's like, I could hold up a sheet of paper and show you these slides and read the information. Like, if you make it engaging, appropriately so, but if you make it engaging, like, it has a different impact on people. So, creativity and opportunities to express it are everywhere. And so, I
Exactly.
mean, that's like, even if you don't think you're creative, you are. You're creating something all the time, whether you know it or not. Best to take control of it and do it intentionally. But yeah, no, that's something it's a never ending conversation. But those are the main points. Just allowing yourself to flow. When you focus too much on like, I want to make something, I want to go
Yeah,
somewhere with this, it creates an internal friction inside of you. That kind of it acts as like a brake. Like, it's kind of slows down the flow of energy that's trying to move through you. You've got to learn to just like disassociate from your desire. It's not that you're going to necessarily rid of that desire, but as much as you can to just release the need to make it be something and just let it be what it is. Those are the main things that I try to hit with people. So
yeah, I agree. Totally. All right, last question. You're 95, you're 100 plus, whatever, however long you choose to live this life.
as
You're
long
on
as you know I choose my death. Thank you for
yes,
acknowledging that.
yes, you're on your deathbed, and what your loved ones are all around you. What do you wanna be remembered for?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to die in bed.
I like
No, I'm definitely going to die in some sort of fiery, dramatic fashion.
oh,
I
yeah.
haven't really worked it out yet. It'll be intentional. It'll be when I'm ready to let go, but
Oh, for
it'll
sure.
be quite extraordinary. That's already
Love the
been
story.
prearranged. Yes, for sure. As far as being remembered, I think that the most important thing for life in general is, how do you make other people feel,
Yeah,
right? Because I mean, I think Marcus Aurelius said it's like, what do you care what generations ahead of you remember? What do you care if your words live on forever? Eventually, people are going to forget. Even if you survive for 10,000 years in thoughts, like, eventually people are going to forget. What's important is what's right here, right now,
yeah,
and it's like, yeah, you can be after immortality, you can want to influence future generations. I think that's a noble thing. It probably often comes from ignoble motivations within people
yeah,
for, some sort of egoic viewpoint, but
for sure.
the way that you affect other people is very important. Do you generally uplift them? Do you typically make them feel better? not in a false way, but like, do they feel refreshed being around you? Do they get
Yeah.
something out of your interaction? And it can be subtle, it can be simple, it can be as simple as like giving somebody your full attention, which is so rare. But when you talk to somebody, they talk to you and you listen to them, like something that basic can really change the way that people feel about their whole lives because so many people feel unseen. They feel they're isolated, they're invisible, they're separated from everyone else. So the more that you can uplift them and spread a general sense of positivity into the world, the better. That's all I would care about. That's all I care about.
Boom. That's it. Great answer. Great answer. I love that. That's so good. All right. Do you have any final words for those listening or watching at home?
Show is Psychology Hacks for me. Talk's still there. I don't really keep up with it anymore. Pretty active on Instagram though. That's how a lot of people get in touch with me. So if you're interested, the website is Psychology Hacks as well. There's some coaching forms that you can fill out just for contact info, or you can just jump on Instagram and shoot me a DM. I'll respond within a couple days.
Thank you so much for watching and listening today. Let's stay connected. You can either click on the video or click the little subscribe button so we can stay connected. And also be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at coach.redwallace to get more consistent encouragement and motivation to live your better than best life.